Welcome back to Mr. DuPage's classroom. This lesson is for my Algebra 1 class. It is 12.6, Solving Rational Expressions, Day 2. So in our first lesson, in Day 1, all we talked about were problems like this first example where I have three fractions. Remember, if I have a whole number, I just need to put it over 1, so I give myself a third fraction. Okay. What I'm going to do at this point, because there's three fractions, I think of three letters, LCD. What's shared in my denominator? It's just this x, so my LCD is x. What do I do with my LCD? I'm going to multiply it by all the numerators. So 3 times x over x minus 5 times x over x equals 2 times x. That's technically over 1, but you don't need it if you don't want. What I would do now is simplify what I can. So the x's would go away and the x's would go away, leaving me with 3 minus 5 equals 2x. 3 minus 5 is negative 2 equals 2x. Divide by 2, and negative 1 would equal x. The other piece of information that I need there is my restriction. Well, my restriction in this case is just going to be x cannot equal 0 because I have these single x's in the denominator. So that is the quick review of what we talked about in our last lesson. Let's move on to today, where I have a rational proportion. So I only have two fractions around an equal sign. If I only have two fractions around an equal sign, I'm going to think of two words: cross multiply. All right. So if I have three fractions around an equal sign, it's LCD, three letters. If I have two fractions around an equal sign, it is going to be two words: cross multiply. Before I do that, again, what I want to do is get my restrictions. So in this case, I actually have two restrictions. From the x, I have x cannot equal 0, and from the x plus 4, I have x cannot equal negative 4. At this point, what I want to do is cross multiply. Now, I take things to the numerator, so I'm going to take the x to the 1, and I'm going to take the x plus 4 to the 2. So it's 2 times x plus 4 equals x. Need to go ahead and distribute. Give me 2x plus 8 equals x. Now I want to move, usually I want to move the smaller x. If I do that, it's actually going to create an extra step for me. So in this case, I'm going to subtract the 2x to get the x's on one side and the number on the other. X minus 2x is negative x. Divide by negative 1. And negative 8 equals x. I would want to check that. To go ahead and check that, I'd be 2 over negative 8, which is negative 1 over 4. And then negative 8 plus 4. I'm going to put the negative 8 back into the original problem to see if it is true. And in this case, it will be. So you do want to check your answers to make sure that they will work. Okay. On to B. What are my restrictions? So my first restriction comes from that. X cannot equal 0. My second restriction comes from here. X cannot equal 2. I'm going to cross multiply again. So I have 3 times x minus 2 equals 5x. I'm going to distribute the 3, so 3x minus 6 equals 5x. Subtract the 3x from both sides. Negative 6 equals 2x, and I can divide by 2. So negative 3 equals x. Since that is not one of my restrictions, it will work. Okay. On to C. C, I'm only going to have one restriction because I only have one variable in the denominator. The restriction here comes just from the y plus 1, so y cannot equal negative 1. I'm going to cross multiply, so it's y times y plus 1 equals 20. When I distribute, with y squared plus y equals 20. Now remember the rule: anytime I have a variable squared, I want to bring everything to it and make sure that that variable is positive. Well, the y squared is positive right now, so I want to bring everything to it. I'm going to subtract the 20 from both sides. Y squared plus y minus 20 will equal 0. At this point, I have three terms, so I'm going to have to factor using generic factoring. So I'm going to make a factor tree of 20. 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. The middle term is positive, meaning my larger numbers are positive. The last term is negative, meaning that they have to multiply to a negative, so my smaller numbers must be negative. What can multiply to negative 20 and add to positive 1 is negative 4 and positive 5, so y minus 4 times y plus 5 equals 0. You can use the 0 property and solve. So y equals 4 and y equals negative 5. Check that against your restrictions. The restriction is just negative 1, so all of my answers, or both of my answers, should be good. Okay, on to D. Again, it's just going to be cross multiplication, so I'm going to cross multiply. Actually, before I do that, I'm sorry, I need my restrictions, right? So we have our restrictions. The y squared gives me that y cannot equal 0, and the y plus 8 tells me that y cannot equal negative 8. Okay, so I cross multiply, so 4 times y plus 8 equals y squared. Distribute the 4, so 4y plus 32 equals y squared. At this point I have a y squared. It is positive, so I just need to move everything to it. Subtract the 4y, subtract the 32. So 0 equals y squared minus 4y minus 32. Now I have three terms. I need to factor, so what multiplies to 32 and adds to negative 4? I have 1 times 32, 2 times 16, 4 times 8. Sign in the middle term is negative. Needs to multiply to a negative, so all the smaller numbers will be positive. What multiplies to negative 32 and adds to negative 4? Positive 4, negative 8. So 0 equals y plus 4 and y minus 8. At this point, I need to use the 0 property. So y plus 4 equals 0. Y minus 8 equals 0. Subtract 4 from both sides. Y equals negative 4. Add 8 to both sides. Y equals 8. Now my restriction says that it will be negative 8 is a restriction. So positive 8 is actually still good. Negative 4 is actually still good. I'm all right there. All right. On to E. On to E. What I'm going to do in E is again cross multiply, but before I do that, I have to figure out my restrictions. Well, one of my restrictions is going to be x cannot equal 2, coming from the x minus 2. So x cannot equal positive 2. The other restriction comes from x squared minus 4. X squared minus 4 is actually what I'm going to have to do is I want to set that equal to 0. I'm going to add the 4 to both, or not equal to 0, I'm sorry. Add the 4 to both sides. X squared cannot equal 4. Square root it. So x cannot equal positive or negative 2. Okay? All right, now that we have our restrictions, what we're going to do is go ahead and cross multiply. Give me negative 2 times x squared minus 4 would be equal to, I'm going to have to get rid of some of this restriction stuff. I apologize, guys. So the restrictions were x cannot equal 2 and x cannot equal plus or minus 2. So I have negative 2 times x squared minus 4, and I have x minus 2 times x minus 4. What I have to do at this point is go ahead and distribute. So it would be negative 2x squared plus 8 equals, distribute. This would be x squared minus 4x minus 2x plus 8. So negative 2x squared plus 8 equals, I need to go ahead and combine like terms over here. This will be negative 6x plus 8. At this point, what I want to do is get everything to the same side so that I can factor. So I'm going to add the 2x squared to both sides, and I'm going to subtract the 8 from both sides. Leaves me with 0 equals, well, x squared plus 2x squared is 3x squared minus 6x. 8 minus 8 becomes 0, so now I'm just down to 3x squared minus 6x. At this point, I can take out a GCF of 3x, leaving me with x minus 2. Use the 0 property. 3x equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. Divide by 3. X equals 0. Is a good answer because it's not one of my restrictions. Can add the 2 to both sides. X equals 2 is not a good answer because of my restrictions. Okay? So on to F. F, again, what do I need to do here is figure out my restrictions. The y squared would get me y cannot equal 0. The y squared plus 1. Y squared plus 1 cannot equal 0. Subtract 1 from both sides. Y squared cannot equal negative 1. At this point, I would try to take the square root of a negative, which is not possible. So there is no restriction that comes from y squared plus 1. My only restriction is going to be y equals 0. Once I have my restriction, I can cross multiply. So it's 2 times y squared plus 1 equals 2y squared. Distribute the 2. So 2y squared plus 2 equals 2y squared. I want to get the variables on one side, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract this 2y squared from both sides. So 2 equals 0, which is not true, meaning I have no solution. All right, let's keep forging ahead here. Only got a couple left. G. Again, I need to look at my restrictions first. So my restrictions are, it's going to be the same. It's going to be that y cannot equal 1, since both my denominators are the same. At this point, I can go ahead and cross multiply. So y plus 3 times y minus 1 equals 4 times y minus 1. Do double distribution over here. So I get y squared y squared minus y plus 3y minus 3 equals, single distribution here, 4y minus 4. I need to combine like terms on the left, so y squared negative y plus 3y is positive 2y minus 3 equals 4y minus 4. If I subtract the 4y from both sides and add the 4 to both sides, that way I'm getting everything over to the y squared. I end up with y squared minus 2y plus 1 equals 0. At this point, I need to factor. So what multiplies to 1 and can add to negative 2? It would be y minus 1 times y minus 1 equals 0. Since it is y minus 1 and y minus 1, I only have to set one of them equal to 0. Add 1 to both sides. Y equals 1, which is my restriction, unfortunately. So my answer is no solution. Okay. The other thing that you can look at there, since they both have y minus 1 in the denominator, an easy thing I could do is actually just cancel out the y minus 1s and make it y plus 3 equals 4. So here's another way I could do that. Since they both have y minus 1 in the denominator, I can make this y plus 3 equals 4. Subtract the 3 from both sides, and y would equal 1, which still would get me no solution because my restriction is 1. If we look at that on H, my restriction is x cannot equal 1. I can either use the cross multiplication, which I'm going to do first. I have x squared times x minus 1 equals 1 times x minus 1. Distribute. So be x to the third minus x squared equals x minus 1. If I subtract x from both sides and add 1 to both sides, I'm going to end up with x to the third minus x squared minus x plus 1 equals 0. I could at this point factor by grouping if I wanted to. However, it would probably just be easier to go ahead and, like we said a minute ago, I can just make this x squared equals 1, take the square root, x equals plus or minus 1, meaning I have x equals 1, which cannot work, and x equals negative 1, which does work. That is the easier way to go about that. I was just showing you that you could, in fact, keep going and factor by grouping, going a long direction, but it's just easier and quicker to go ahead and say, because both of the denominators are the same, the numerators must be equal to each other. And I can just set those equal to each other and solve. Okay, that is the end of our lesson. Understand the difference between solving rational equations, where I have 3 fractions around an equal sign. That's when I must use the LCD, so 3 fractions, 3 letters, or 2 fractions around an equal sign, where I can use cross multiplication, 2 fractions, 2 words. If you have any questions for me about this lesson, please make sure you come in and see me. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching the video, and have a great day.